It was just another quiet Tuesday afternoon at a small diner tucked away on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The kind of place where everyone knows each other, and life moves at its own unhurried pace. Locals sat in their usual spots, sipping coffee, or munching on greasy fries while chatting about nothing in particular. It wasn't fancy: cracked vinyl booths, faded posters on the walls, and a jukebox that hadn't worked properly in years. But it had charm. A comforting sort of charm that made people feel like they belonged. The door swung open, jingling faintly as a gust of warm California air swept inside. Everyone turned instinctively to see who had walked in. And there he was. A tall figure, with a bucket hat pulled low over his face, oversized hoodie draped casually around his shoulders, and sunglasses shielding his eyes despite being indoors. He looked relaxed, almost too cool for this tiny diner. Some folks glanced at him curiously, others went back to their meals without giving him much thought. But one person noticed right away: the waitress working the late shift. Her name tag read Lisa, though most regulars called her by her sharp tongue instead. Lisa wasn't your typical bubbly server who smiled through every order. She had an edge to her, a no-nonsense attitude that came across loud and clear. Maybe it was because she didn't watch TV or listen to music. Maybe it was because she preferred books and indie films over celebrity gossip. Whatever the reason, Lisa marched up to the newcomer with her usual confidence, not recognizing the man standing before her. "All right, what's the deal?" Lisa asked, planting one hand on her hip as she held out a menu with the other. Her tone was playful but laced with sarcasm. "You think this is some five-star restaurant? Lose the shades, Hollywood." She smirked, glancing around at the other customers, expecting them to share in her joke. A few heads turned, curious about how the stranger would respond. But the man didn't seem fazed. In fact, he looked amused, leaning slightly against the counter with a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Nah, shorty," he said smoothly, his voice calm and easygoing. "Just here for a bite. What you got?" Lisa blinked, taken aback by his laid-back response. Most people would have gotten defensive or awkward under her teasing, but this guy seemed different. He exuded a quiet confidence, like he knew something she didn't. Still, she shrugged it off. To her, he was just another customer trying too hard to look important. Before she could say anything else, another voice chimed in from behind her. "Yo, Lisa, leave the dude alone." It was Malik, a familiar face at the diner. He was a delivery driver who stopped by almost daily after finishing his rounds. Today he'd parked his van outside and wandered in, hoping to grab a quick lunch before heading home. But when he spotted the man at the counter, his jaw dropped. Malik froze mid-step, staring wide-eyed at the stranger. Then, slowly, a huge grin spread across his face. Without hesitation, he strode forward, completely ignoring Lisa's protests. "Man, I can't believe this," Malik exclaimed, shaking the man's hand so enthusiastically it looked like he might pull his arm out of its socket. You're actually here. This is insane." Lisa raised an eyebrow, watching the scene unfold with growing confusion. "What are you talking about, Malik? Who is he supposed to be?" Malik practically bounced with excitement. "Are you serious right now? You don't know who this is?" He pointed dramatically at the man who was still smiling patiently. "This is Snoop Dogg, like the Snoop Dogg, the rapper, the legend, the icon." Lisa stared blankly for a moment, then burst out laughing. She doubled over, clutching her sides, as if Malik had just told the funniest joke imaginable. "Oh, come on," she managed to choke out between giggles. "Snoop Dogg? Really? Sure, and I'm Beyoncé." Malik groaned, throwing his hands up in frustration. "I'm telling you. Lisa, it's him. Look closer." He grabbed his phone from his pocket and quickly pulled up Snoop's Instagram page. Scrolling through recent posts, he shoved the screen toward Lisa. "See? Same outfit, same vibe. Dude's legit." Lisa squinted at the phone, her laughter fading into uncertainty. Could it really be true? She glanced back at the man, who was now leaning casually against the counter, watching the whole exchange with obvious amusement. His signature shades were still perched on his nose, and his posture screamed effortless cool. Slowly, realization began to dawn on her. "No way," Lisa muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her cheeks flushed red as she realized the magnitude of her earlier comments. She'd mocked one of the biggest names in entertainment. And worse, she'd done it without even realizing who he was. For a moment, panic gripped her. How was she going to fix this? Snoop, however, remained unfazed. With a chuckle, he reached for a napkin, scribbled something on it, and slid it across the counter toward her. "Here you go, baby girl," he said, tipping his sunglasses down just enough to reveal a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "That autograph's worth more than your whole tip jar." Lisa's jaw dropped as she stared at the napkin. There it was, plain as day. Snoop Dogg's signature scrawled in bold letters. Proof undeniable. Her stomach sank as embarrassment washed over her. All those sarcastic remarks, all that attitude, and she'd been dead wrong the entire time. Now she had no idea what to do next. Lisa stood frozen, the napkin clutched tightly in her hand like it might disappear if she let go. Her mind raced as she tried to process what had just happened. She'd cracked jokes, rolled her eyes, and even mocked this man, all while he sat, there cool as a cucumber, letting her dig herself deeper into an embarrassing hole. Now staring at his autograph on that crumpled napkin, reality hit her like a freight train. This wasn't some random guy trying too hard to look important. This was Snoop Dogg, one of the most iconic figures in music history. Her face burned, red, and for a moment she considered crawling under the counter and hiding until closing time, but instead she forced herself to meet his gaze. His expression hadn't changed. He still wore that same amused grin, like he found the whole situation more entertaining than anything else. It made her feel worse somehow. If he'd been angry or offended, she could have handled that. But this quiet, light-hearted acceptance, that was harder to swallow. Malik, on the other hand, couldn't contain his excitement. He was practically bouncing on his toes, grinning ear to ear as he glanced between Lisa and Snoop. "Told you so," he said triumphantly, pointing at Lisa with mock accusation. "You owe me $50, remember?" Lisa groaned, slapping a BI, hand over her forehead. She'd completely forgotten about their bet. In her defense, how could she have known she was betting against Snoop Dogg himself? Still, a deal was a deal, and Malik wasn't going to let her off the hook easily. Yeah, Lisa muttered, avoiding eye contact with both of them. "I'll pay you later." Then, turning hesitantly back to Snoop, she added, "And, sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to—" "No harm done," Snoop interrupted gently, waving a hand dismissively. "Just keep it real, baby girl. Ain't nothing wrong with speaking your mind." His words caught her off guard. Instead of holding a grudge or making her feel small, he was brushing it off like it was no big deal. Somehow that made her feel even guiltier. Here she was, expecting him to be upset or demand an apology, and yet he acted like her rudeness was just another Tuesday afternoon. Maybe that's why people loved him so much, not just because of his music, but because of who he was as a person. Feeling a mix of relief and determination, Lisa decided to make things right. She straightened up, tucking the napkin carefully into her apron pocket before grabbing a fresh notepad. "All right," she said firmly, her tone shifting from defensive to professional. "Let's start over. What can I get for you?" Snoop chuckled, clearly enjoying her newfound seriousness. "How about a cheeseburger and fries?" he asked casually, leaning back in his seat. "And maybe a chocolate shake if y'all got one." Lisa nodded quickly, jotting down the order with laser focus. "Got it. Cheeseburger, fries, chocolate shake. Anything else?" "That'll do it," Snoop replied, giving her a thumbs up. As Lisa hurried away to place the order, Malik slid into the booth across from Snoop, still buzzing with energy. "Man, this is crazy," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've been listening to your music since I was a kid. Never thought I'd actually meet you in person." Snoop leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "Appreciate that, bruh. Always means a lot when fans show love." Malik grinned, feeling bolder now that Lisa wasn't around to tease him. "Honestly, though, I gotta say, you're way cooler in real life than I expected. Like seriously chill." Snoop laughed, the sound deep and warm. "That's the key, my dude. Stay true to yourself, and everything else falls into place. Their conversation flowed naturally after that, jumping from music to life lessons to random stories about growing up in LA. Malik soaked up every word, hanging on to Snoop's advice like it was gold. Meanwhile, Lisa kept glancing over from behind the counter, torn between feeling awkward and curious. She didn't know much about Snoop's music, but watching him interact with Malik gave her a glimpse of why he was so beloved. There was something genuine about him, a kindness that put people at ease. When the food arrived, Lisa delivered it personally, setting the plate down with extra care. "Here you go," she said softly, meeting his eyes briefly before looking away. "Cheeseburger, fries, and your shake. Let me know if you need anything else." Snoop gave her a nod of approval. "Much appreciated, Shorty." For the first time since he walked in, Lisa felt a flicker of pride. Sure, she'd messed up royally at first, but she'd owned up to her mistake and tried to make amends. And judging by the smile on Snoop's face, she'd succeeded, or at least earned his forgiveness. As he dug into his meal, Malik continued chatting animatedly, sharing stories about his delivery job and asking questions about Snoop's career. The atmosphere in the diner shifted subtly, becoming warmer and lighter. Other customers noticed the buzz and began whispering among themselves, piecing together who the mysterious visitor might be. A few even pulled out their phones to snap discreet photos, though Snoop didn't seem to mind. Through it all, Lisa stayed busy, refilling drinks and checking on tables, but part of her attention remained on the booth where Snoop sat. Every so often she'd catch snippets of their conversation, marveling at how effortlessly Snoop connected with people. Whether he was talking to a starstruck fan like Malik or cracking jokes with the cook in the kitchen, he treated everyone with the same respect and humor. By the time dessert rolled around, Lisa felt like a different person. The initial shock and embarrassment had faded, replaced by gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson she'd learned and for the reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen when you least expect them. As the afternoon wore on, the diner began to feel less like a sleepy little joint and more like the center of something special. Word had spread quickly among the customers that Snoop Dogg, yes, the Snoop Dogg, was sitting in their midst. I know at first it was just hushed whispers and stolen glances, but soon enough, people started approaching his booth one by one. Some wanted selfies, others simply wanted to shake his hand or say thank you for the music that had soundtracked parts of their lives. Snoop greeted each person with the same easygoing charm, making them feel like they were the only ones in the room. Lisa watched from behind the counter, torn between admiration and disbelief. She'd gone from mocking him to marveling at how effortlessly he handled the attention. There was no ego, no pretense, just genuine warmth. It made her reflect on her own behavior earlier. How had she been so quick to judge? Why hadn't she taken a moment to see past his sunglasses and hoodie before jumping to conclusions? Malik, meanwhile, was soaking up every second of the experience. He sat across from Snoop, leaning forward eagerly as if trying to absorb everything, the man said. "You know," Malik said thoughtfully, "I always wondered what it would be like to meet someone famous. Like, do they act all stuck up or different from regular people? But you're just normal." Snoop chuckled, popping a fry into his mouth. "That's 'cause I'm normal, bruh. Just happen to have a job that pays better than most." The comment drew laughter from both Malik and Lisa, who couldn't help but smile despite herself. For someone who could easily afford private jets and five-star meals, Snoop seemed completely unfazed by the simplicity of the diner. He sipped his milkshake, complimented the cook on the burger, and joked about how the fries reminded him of his mom's cooking. It wasn't just an act, it felt real, like he genuinely appreciated the little things in life. But Lisa still felt uneasy. Sure, Snoop had forgiven her, and Malik's excitement had lightened the mood, but she couldn't shake the weight of her earlier rudeness. She knew she needed to do more than apologize. She wanted to make sure he left with a positive impression of the diner and of her. When there was a brief lull in the crowd, Lisa decided to take matters into her own hands. Grabbing a fresh notepad, she walked over to Snoop's table, her steps slower and more deliberate this time. "Hey, she began hesitantly, twisting the pen in her fingers. Can I get you anything else? Dessert, maybe? We've got pie today. Snoop glanced up at her, his expression softening when he saw the sincerity in her eyes. Pie, huh? What kind? Peach, Lisa replied, perking up slightly. It's homemade. Well, not by me, obviously. By Rosa, our cook. She swears it's the best thing on the menu. Snoop nodded approvingly. Sounds good. Bring me a slice and you should join us. Lisa blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. Wait, me? Sit down? Yeah, why not? Snoop shrugged, gesturing to the empty space beside Malik. We're having a good time here. No reason you can't be part of it. For a moment, Lisa hesitated. Sitting at a table with Snoop Dogg, that felt worlds away from serving him burgers and fries. But then she noticed the encouraging look Malik gave her, and she realized she didn't have much of a choice. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about showing gratitude for the kindness Snoop had shown her. All right, she said, finally pulling out the chair and sliding in awkwardly. But only because you forced me. The three of them laughed, the tension melting away as Lisa relaxed into the conversation. Snoop asked her questions about the diner, curious about its history and the stories behind the regulars. Lisa found herself opening up, sharing tales of quirky patrons and chaotic rush hours. She even admitted that working there wasn't always glamorous, but it had taught her patience and humility. You know, Snoop said after a while, leaning back in his seat. Life's funny like that. Sometimes the lessons we need come from the last place we expect. Ain't no shame in making mistakes long as you learn something from 'em. His words hit home for Lisa. She nodded slowly, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since he'd walked in, she didn't feel like she was walking on eggshells. Instead, she felt seen, not as the rude waitress who'd insulted him, but as a person capable of growth. By the time Rosa brought out the peach pie, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The diner buzzed with energy, thanks to Snoop's presence, but also because of the connection that had formed between him, Lisa, and Malik. They weren't celebrities and fans anymore. They were just three people sharing a meal and swapping stories. As Snoop took a bite of the pie, his face lit up with approval. Damn, this is good, he declared, pointing his fork at Rosa, who blushed furiously from across the room. Y'all gotta give her a raise or something. Everyone laughed, including Lisa, who felt a surge of pride, not just for Rosa's baking skills, but for the way the whole day had turned around. From mockery to mutual respect, from awkwardness to camaraderie, it was proof that even the rockiest starts could lead to something beautiful. When the check finally came, Snoop insisted on paying, not just for himself, but for everyone in the diner. Consider it my treat, he said with a grin, pulling out a wad of cash that made Lisa's jaw drop. Y'all fed me good, so it's only right I return the favor. The gesture left everyone speechless. Customers cheered, Rosa teared up, and Lisa couldn't stop smiling as she helped distribute the money. It was the kind of moment people would talk about for years, a reminder that even in the smallest, most ordinary places, magic could happen. And, as Snoop stood to leave, shaking hands and waving goodbye, Lisa realized something important. Sometimes the biggest lessons come wrapped in the simplest moments. All it takes is a little honesty, humility, and a willingness to see the world, and the people in it a little differently. Snoop Dogg's departure from the diner didn't happen all at once. Instead, it unfolded like a slow-moving wave, with him stopping to chat with nearly everyone on his way out. He posed for photos, signed napkins and receipts, and even gave a few hugs to the older regulars who admitted they'd been fans since his early days. The entire place buzzed with energy, as if the air itself had been charged with excitement. Even Rosa, the usually reserved cook, stepped out of the kitchen to thank him personally for the glowing review of her peach pie. By the time he reached the door, the whole diner felt lighter, like something magical had just occurred. Lisa stood near the counter, watching the scene unfold with mixed emotions. On one hand, she was relieved that everything had turned out okay, and more than okay, really. Snoop had been nothing but gracious, turning what could have been an embarrassing disaster into a memory she'd cherish forever. But on the other hand, she couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. She replayed their initial interaction in her mind, cringing at how dismissive she'd been. Sure, he'd forgiven her, but that didn't erase the fact that she'd judged him unfairly. Snoop paused by the exit. He turned back toward Lisa and Malik, giving them a final nod of acknowledgement. "Y'all take care now," he said warmly, tipping his sunglasses down just enough to meet their eyes. "And remember, stay true." Malik grinned ear to ear, practically bouncing on his toes. "You got it, man. Thanks for everything." Lisa, however, found herself frozen, unsure of what to say. Her voice caught in her throat as she tried to form words, but before she could respond, Snoop gave her a small smile and pushed open the door. The bell above it jingled softly as he stepped outside, disappearing into the warm California afternoon. For a moment, the diner fell silent. Everyone seemed to be processing what had just happened, letting the reality sink in. Then, slowly, conversations picked up again, this time filled with laughter and speculation about whether Snoop might return someday. Some joked about renaming the diner Snoop's Spot, while others debated which song best captured the vibe of the day. Amidst the chatter, Lisa retreated behind the counter, needing a moment to collect her thoughts. Malik followed her, his grin still plastered across his face. "Can you believe that just happened?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "Like, seriously? That was insane." Lisa sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Yeah, I can believe it," she muttered, her tone quieter than usual. "But I still can't believe I was such an idiot." Malik frowned, shaking his head. "Hey, don't do that to yourself. You didn't know who he was. It's not like you meant any harm." "I know," Lisa replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "But that's the thing, it doesn't matter if I meant it or not. I acted like a jerk and now I'm stuck wondering if he thinks I'm some rude, entitled person." Malik hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. After a beat, he said gently, "Look, I get it. You're hard on yourself because you messed up. But here's the thing. You owned it. You apologized, and you made sure he left feeling good about being here. That counts for something." Lisa glanced at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. For all his playful teasing earlier, Malik had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things when it mattered most. Still, she wasn't ready to let herself off the hook so easily. "Maybe," she admitted reluctantly. "But owning up doesn't change the fact that I screwed up in the first place." Malik shrugged, clearly unwilling to argue further. "All right, fine. Keep beating yourself up if you want, but don't forget, you also learned something today. Something important." "What's that supposed to mean?" Lisa asked, raising an eyebrow. "It means," Malik explained, his tone softening, "that sometimes we need moments like this to remind us not to judge people too quickly. You thought he was just some random guy showing off, and yeah, you were wrong. But now you'll think twice next time before assuming stuff about someone." Lisa stared at him, letting his words sink in. As much as she hated to admit it, he was right. The day hadn't just been about meeting Snoop Dogg. It had been about recognizing her own biases and learning to approach people with more openness. It wasn't going to be easy, and she doubted she'd ever fully shake the habit of jumping to conclusions. But maybe, just maybe, she could start trying. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Customers lingered longer than usual, reliving the highlights of Snoop's visit and speculating about whether he'd drop any hints about it on social media. Rosa emerged from the kitchen periodically to bask in the glow of compliments about her pie, while Malik regaled anyone who would listen with stories about growing up listening to Snoop's music. Lisa stayed busy, tidying up tables and refilling drinks, but her mind kept drifting back to the conversation she'd had with Malik. By closing time, the diner was spotless, and the staff was exhausted, but no one seemed eager to leave. They gathered around the counter, sharing laughs and debating how long it would take for word of Snoop's visit to spread beyond the town. Someone suggested framing the signed napkin and hanging it on the wall as a keepsake, an idea that earned unanimous approval. Lisa volunteered to handle it, carefully tucking the napkin into her bag to take home and preserve properly. As she locked up the diner and walked to her car, Lisa felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The day had been a whirlwind of emotions, embarrassment, gratitude, reflection, but it had ended on a hopeful note. She climbed into her car and pulled out her phone, scrolling through Snoop's Instagram feed until she found the post Malik had shown her earlier. Seeing the picture of him wearing the same outfit reminded her of how surreal the whole experience had been. Before driving away, she took a deep breath and smiled to herself. Life had a funny way of teaching lessons when you least expected them, and sometimes those lessons came wrapped in bucket hats and oversized hoodies. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for sure: she'd never look at another customer the same way again. The next morning, Lisa woke up with the kind of grogginess that comes from tossing and turning all night. Her mind had been racing, replaying every detail of the previous day: the awkward first impression, the mortifying realization, the heartfelt apology, and finally the unexpected connection she'd made with Snoop Dogg. She lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling before reaching for her phone. Scrolling through social media felt like second nature now, but this time, she wasn't looking for memes or updates from friends. She wanted to see if there was any trace of her diner on Snoop's feed. Sure enough, there it was, a post he'd uploaded late last night. The caption read, "Stopped by a little spot off the beaten path today. Met some real ones who reminded me why I love what I do. Shout out to the homies and the peach pie. Y'all stay blessed." Below the words was a photo of him sitting in the booth, smiling wide as Malik leaned in beside him, clearly mid-laugh. In the background, Lisa could see herself in the corner of the frame, half turned toward them, looking both flustered and intrigued. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a casual shout-out, it was genuine appreciation, the kind that made people feel seen and valued. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the entire diner, the customers, Rosa's cooking, Malik's enthusiasm. All of it wrapped up in one perfect post. She couldn't help but smile, even though tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. When she arrived at work later, that day, the diner was already buzzing. Someone had spotted the post early that morning and shared it in the local community group online. By the time Lisa walked through the door, phones were out, fingers were scrolling, and voices overlapped in excited chatter. Even Rosa, who rarely paid attention to social media, had printed out the screenshot and taped it to the wall next to the framed napkin. "This is big," Rosa declared, hands on her hips. "We're famous." Lisa laughed nervously, still trying to process everything. Famous? That seemed like a stretch. But as she looked around the room, she realized something remarkable had happened. The diner, once just a quiet hangout for locals, had become a symbol of serendipity, a place where ordinary life intersected with extraordinary moments. And somehow, she'd played a part in making it happen. Throughout the day, customers poured in, not just regulars but newcomers curious to see the Snoop Dogg diner for themselves. Some brought their kids, hoping to snap pictures by the framed napkin. Others ordered slices of peach pie, eager to taste the dessert that had earned such high praise. Lisa found herself fielding questions left and right. What was he like? Did he really seem as cool in person? How long did he stay? She answered each one patiently, her earlier embarrassment melting away with every retelling of the story. Malik stopped by during his lunch break, beaming with pride. "Told you this would blow up," he teased, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "People are going to start lining up outside just to sit in the same booth as him." Lisa rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Yeah, well, don't get too comfortable. You're still washing dishes for a week if I catch you slacking off." Hey, let's not forget who won the bet," Malik shot back, holding up his hands defensively. "Besides, you're the one getting all the attention now. Maybe you should give me a cut of your tips." They both laughed, falling into their usual banter. But beneath the jokes, there was an unspoken understanding between them. They'd shared something special together, a moment neither of them would ever forget. And while Malik might have been the bigger fan, Lisa had grown to appreciate Snoop in her own way. Not because of his music, but because of the lesson he'd unknowingly taught her about humility, kindness, and second chances. As the lunch rush died down, Lisa took a break to sit in the booth where Snoop had spent most of his visit. She traced her fingers along the edge of the table, imagining what it must have felt like for him to walk into such a humble place and treat everyone like family. It struck her then. Fame hadn't changed him. He'd stayed grounded, choosing to connect with people rather than distance himself from them. That was rare, especially for someone who could have easily brushed off her rudeness or demanded better treatment. Instead, he'd turned the situation into something positive, leaving behind not just autographs and photos, but memories that would last a lifetime. Later that evening, after closing up shop, Lisa decided to take a detour on her way home. She drove to a nearby park, parking under a tree where she often went to clear her head. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the grass, and she sat there for a while, letting the quiet soothe her thoughts. She pulled out her phone, again rereading Snoop's post for the 100th time. His words echoed in her mind. Met some real ones. Real ones. The phrase stuck with her. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about showing up, owning your mistakes and treating others with respect, even when they didn't expect it. That's what made someone real, and that's what Snoop had recognized in her despite her initial blunder. By the time she got home, Lisa felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She knew life wouldn't always hand her opportunities to redeem herself so gracefully. But she also knew she could carry the lessons of that day forward, into her job, her relationships, and every interaction she had from that point on. Fame might come and go, but authenticity, that was timeless. The following weeks passed quickly, and the diner settled into its new rhythm. Business picked up, thanks in part to the influx of visitors hoping to catch a glimpse of Snoop's favorite booth. Rosa experimented with new pie recipes, determined to keep the momentum going, while Malik became the unofficial ambassador of the diner, proudly recounting the story to anyone who asked. As for Lisa, she embraced her role as the face of the operation, greeting customers with warmth and humor that hadn't always come naturally to her. One afternoon, as she wiped down tables during a lull, a familiar voice called out from the doorway. "Yo, shorty, you miss me?" Lisa froze, her rag hovering midair. Slowly, she turned around, half convinced she was hearing things. But there he was, Snoop Dogg, standing in the entrance with that same easygoing grin. He waved casually, stepping inside like he owned the place. For a split second, Lisa panicked, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. Then, shaking off her disbelief, she broke into a wide smile. "What are you doing here?" she asked, rushing over to greet him. "Came back for more of that pie," he replied, tipping his sunglasses down to wink at her. "And maybe another chat with my favorite waitress." Lisa laughed, feeling a surge of gratitude wash over her. Somehow, against all odds, Snoop Dogg had returned, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. And in that moment, she realized something important. Sometimes the best connections aren't just fleeting moments. They're the start of something lasting. Snoop's surprise return to the diner felt like a scene straight out of a movie. One minute Lisa was wiping down tables, lost in her thoughts about the past few weeks, and the next, there he was, walking through the door like it was no big deal. The bell above the entrance jingled softly, but his presence filled the room instantly. Customers turned their heads, some recognizing him right away, others whispering excitedly as they pieced together who had just walked in. Lisa stood, frozen for a moment, unsure if she was dreaming. When Snoop called out to her with that familiar, "Yo, shorty," she snapped back to reality, her cheeks flushing red. Rushing over to greet him, she couldn't help but laugh nervously. "Seriously? You're back already?" "Told you I'd be back for more pie," he said with a grin, sliding into the same booth he'd occupied last time. He looked around the diner, taking in the framed napkin on the wall and the steady flow of customers. "Looks like business is booming, huh?" "You could say that," Lisa admitted, leaning against the table. "Ever since your post, people have been coming from all over just to sit here. Some even ask if they can take selfies in this booth." Snoop chuckled, clearly pleased with the impact his visit had made. That's what happens when you shout someone out. Folks love a good story. Well, we definitely got one, Lisa said, her tone softening. And honestly, I'm glad you came back. It gives me a chance to say thanks again for everything. Snoop waved her off dismissively. Ain't nothing to thank me for, baby girl. Like I said before, stay true and everything else falls into place. His words hit home once more, reminding Lisa of how much she'd grown since that fateful day. She wasn't just talking about the apology or the lessons learned. She meant the shift in perspective he'd inspired. Before, she'd approached life with a certain cynicism, quick to judge and slow to trust. Now she found herself looking for the good in people, even when it wasn't immediately obvious. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. As word spread that Snoop was back, the diner quickly filled up. Regulars abandoned their usual spots to crowd near his booth, hoping to catch a glimpse or exchange a few words. Strangers introduced themselves shyly, thanking him for his music and sharing how it had shaped their lives. Snoop greeted each person warmly, never making anyone feel like they were interrupting. Even Rosa came out of the kitchen to deliver his order personally, her hands trembling slightly as she set down the plate of peach pie. "This is amazing," Snoop said after taking a bite, pointing his fork at Rosa. "You've got talent, ma'am. Don't let nobody tell you different." Rosa blushed furiously, stammering a quiet thank you before retreating to the kitchen. Lisa watched the interaction with a smile, realizing how much joy Snoop brought not just to her, but to everyone around him. His ability to make people feel valued was something special, a gift that went far beyond fame or fortune. Later, as the crowd thinned out and things settled down, Malik arrived, breathless from rushing over after hearing the news. "Man, I can't believe you're here." "Again!" he exclaimed, sliding into the booth beside Snoop. "This is insane." "Had to come back and check on my crew," Snoop replied casually, like visiting a small-town diner twice in a month was the most normal thing in the world. "Besides, y'all kept me fed last time. Figured it was only fair to return the favor." Malik laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're too cool, man. Seriously." The three of them spent the rest of the evening chatting, swapping stories and laughing like old friends. Snoop shared tales from his travels, while Malik recounted childhood memories of blasting his albums during road trips with his family. Lisa chimed in occasionally, offering quirky anecdotes about the diner and its regulars. For a few hours, it felt like the outside world didn't exist, just the three of them, connected by shared experiences and mutual respect. When it came time for Snoop to leave, he stood by the door, shaking hands and posing for photos one last time. As he prepared to step outside, he turned to Lisa and Malik, his expression thoughtful. "Y'all keep doing what you're doing, all right? This place has heart, and that's rare these days. Don't lose it." Lisa nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "We won't. Promise." With that, Snoop tipped his sunglasses down, flashed his signature grin, and disappeared into the night. The bell above the door jingled softly behind him, leaving the diner eerily quiet in his absence. In the days that followed, life at the diner returned to its usual rhythm, but nothing was quite the same. The framed napkin and Instagram post became permanent fixtures on the wall, drawing smiles from customers and staff alike. Lisa carried herself differently now, her sharp edges softened by the realization that everyone has a story worth hearing. Malik continued to rave about Snoop's kindness, often joking that meeting him was the highlight of his life. And Rosa? She started experimenting with new recipes, determined to keep the spirit of creativity alive. Months later, when asked about the experience, Lisa would simply smile and say, "It changed me." Not because Snoop Dogg had walked into her diner, but because he'd reminded her of something important. That greatness isn't measured by titles or accolades. It's measured by how you treat people. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness leave the biggest impressions. The diner remained a humble little spot off the beaten path, but it had earned a reputation as a place where magic happened. Whether it was the food, the atmosphere, or the memory of a global icon stopping by, visitors left feeling lighter, happier, and more connected to the world around them. And Lisa? Well, She still teased Malik whenever he got starstruck over celebrities. But deep down, she knew she owed him and Snoop a debt of gratitude. Because thanks to them, she'd learned that staying true wasn't just advice for others. It was a way of life.